Oh, well, hey, what happened to our theme song this morning? I don't know what's going on. We are having the worst technical difficulties in the world today, but we are live. Welcome to Who's Left This Week, the unapologetically progressive Sunday morning political news show for Indiana. Our opening theme song, if you had heard it, is by Hoosier singer-songwriter Leslie Nuss. My name is Scott Aaron Rogers, and I'm broadcasting from Bloomington. You know, just another double-stuffed week. Oh, my God. Microphone problems, too. You might not even be hearing me. Anyway, just another double-stuffed week in the news. 3 signs that neoliberalism is dying. Trump tantruming his way through Washington. The federal government weaponized against the most vulnerable. And a bipartisan grab bag of corruption right here in Indiana. All of that and a whole lot more. But before we begin, you know the drill. This is an independent media project. We don't paywall content. We don't have billionaire benefactors. Only individuals like you keep this thing going. Who's Left and the Progressive Indiana Network refuse to hide important information behind paywalls in the middle of a political crisis, even if that's not in our financial best interest. So please, if you find value in this work, go to progressiveindiana.net and subscribe at the paid level. It's only $5 a month or $50 for the whole year to help us build the infrastructure that will pop the right-wing media bubble in this state. And look, if a paid subscription isn't in the cards for you right now, that's okay. You can still help out by liking and sharing on social media, commenting, leaving reviews, providing feedback, forwarding our content to your people. Get us when you can. Mostly, we just want you here in this community of Hoosiers dedicated to making this state and its government work for all of us, not just the elite few. Please join us. Follow me on Blue Sky, Instagram, and Threads at whosleft.us and on Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube at Who's Left. Progressive Indiana Network's handle is the full spelled out name on most sites, but on Blue Sky and TikTok, it is PIN Indiana. Please help us grow with a follow wherever you're at. Now, let's welcome this week's guests. Fingers crossed everything works okay. First of all, she's a writer and researcher, the creator behind the until recently anonymous Hoosier Lemon, now unpeeled for the world to see. Let's give Sierra Martin a squeeze. Sierra, can we hear each other?
Good morning. I can hear you. I know you're having a lot of issues.
Fantastic. Can you work another lemon pun into there somewhere?
I don't know if I can squeeze one out, Scott. I'm tired from the tech problems.
All right. Well, listen, fingers crossed that we're going to be able to all hear our second guest today. From yellow lemons to yellow rubber duckies, he's the Democratic nominee for duck-shaped House District 47 in Johnson and Shelby counties. Put your wings together for Michael Potter. Michael, welcome. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Scott. Thank you for having me. I still cannot.
Fantastic.
Hear Sierra, not to be sour lemons, but I can't hear.
All right. Well, you know what? Hopefully we get this thing figured out, and Michael can hear Sierra by the end of this thing. But you know what? We've got a ton of news today, so let us go ahead and get started. And let us begin with this. So I've got a block of stories I'm going to call The Death of Neoliberalism in 3 Acts. First, former Federal Reserve Chairman Alan Greenspan passed away Monday at age 100. The cultish devotee of libertarian idol Ayn Rand presided over the longest economic expansion in U.S. history at the time. Greenspan's miracle economy of the 1990s was built on disempowering labor, deregulating the financial industry, and facilitating the transfer of trillions of dollars of wealth from the working class to the billionaire class. Celebrated as the maestro during his tenure at the Fed, his reputation collapsed after the 2008 financial crisis, which his policies precipitated. His own post-mortem was candid, if unapologetic. Quote, "I made a mistake in assuming that banks could essentially regulate themselves," end quote. The Financial Crisis Inquiry Commission concluded his 30-year push for deregulation, quote, "stripped away key safeguards which could have helped avoid catastrophe." Editorial note, no shit. All right, so Michael, Greenspan had seen his reputation laundered a bit in recent years as he's defended the Fed's independence from Donald Trump's meddling, but wasn't his whole career devoted to the upward concentration of wealth that led to Trump's rise?
Yeah, I'm waiting for the time, and I suppose I need to get elected first, but then I forget everything that I ever preached about before I was elected. Is that what happens in politics?
Well, in some circles, it certainly seems that way, doesn't it?
It seems that way. And so, yeah, I don't like to pile on at the end here, but yeah, people need to start owning up to their stuff and just being happy with it and run with it. If that's what you did, you stand up. And so, there's going to be a theme, I think, throughout a lot of the news, and this just gets us started.
100 years old, man, just like Kissinger. Why do all of the worst people in the world get to live forever when, I don't know, some of us have seen loved ones die, unfortunately young?
Yeah.
It is not fair. It is way too early in this show for me to lose it. Sierra, you ever hear your parents or grandparents reminisce about like being able to buy a home and raise a family on a single worker's salary while your generation is working like 2 and 3 jobs to barely tread water? This guy had a lot to do with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to point out, I feel about Greenspan's death the way I felt about Henry Kissinger's death, and that I will shed no tears. Greenspan's policies of lowering interest rates, reducing federal budget deficits, and deregulating Wall Street through specifically things like working with Clinton to repeal the Glass-Steagall Act, allowing banks to gamble with personal savings, is exactly what set the stage for the 2008 financial crisis, the thing that exactly locked my generation out of home ownership. We're seeing now that the national average, I think, is 40 years old for the median home buying age, 40 or 50. When, yes, my parents' day, my grandparents' day, yeah, it was like 20 years old. So, but honestly, who can really be surprised when Greenspan's, mentor and longtime friend was Ayn Rand, that, his radical laissez-faire capitalism would lead to such a financial crisis. And for him to just turn around and be like, oh, who could have known that the banks wouldn't be able to self-regulate? I mean, yeah, like that's like saying, well, I mean, your child is addicted to chocolate, they love sugar. Can you just keep the candy next to them and have them self-regulate? I mean, no, inevitably that child is going to get into the candy. You left it there, unregulated.
Yeah. At least the children have an excuse. They're children. Right. We're talking about adult bankers who theoretically are supposed to be, the most responsible, stowed, members of society, right? And even they cannot keep their hands out of the cookie jar, helping themselves, leaving no cookies for the rest of us. Michael, look, it is what is left of the American economy for the rest of us.
That's what we're going to fight it out for.
I left my child with 75% of this downstairs alone. So you're all saying that's going to be a problem.
This is the American neoliberal economy of the last 50 years in cake form. Is that what is that, Michael? That looks good.
That is a vegan oatmeal cream pie from
fantastic.
I don't know.
Looks amazing.
It was gifted to us.
Well, lovely. So, listen, let us move on from Greenspan's passing across the pond, but we're going to stay on a similar theme here. So, of course, Greenspan was a giant of neoliberal economics. These policies pushed in the U.S. by Ronald Reagan and in the U.K. by Margaret Thatcher. And just as American Democrats under Bill Clinton drifted rightward and came to accept and even champion many of these policies, the Labour Party in Britain took a similar course under the leadership of Tony Blair. Blair's New Labour led the UK for 13 years until 2010, but had been out of power since that time until 2024, when Keir Starmer, pictured on screen for those watching, took up residence at 10 Downing Street, adopting key philosophical frameworks and administrative practices championed by Blair and staffing his government with key Blairite figures, including Jeffrey Epstein associate Peter Mandelson. That appointment, as well as a sluggish economy and massive down-ballot losses for Labor, led Starmer to announce his resignation Monday. The freshly elected MP and former Greater Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham, a self-identified socialist, is all but certain to succeed him as Prime Minister. Sierra, a socialist head of state in the UK. Why can't we have nice things?
First, I just want to point out that Keir Starmer is a centrist who panders consistently to the right on issues like trans rights, immigration, and specifically the issue of pro-Palestine, than that movement. In fact, his government decided to label Palestine Action as a terrorist organization. That lets, people like priests, teachers, and pensioners getting arrested for holding up signs of support for pro-Palestinian movements. The irony there is that Keir Starmer is a human rights lawyer who is cracking down on the free speech of Britons for their want of humane treatment of Palestinians, for their advocacy against the human rights violations and crimes against humanity that Israel is committing on a daily basis. Jeremy Corbyn is the Dem Socialist member of parliament that was purged from Starmer's Labour Party for his anti-Semitism of being too pro-Palestinian. The irony here could not be more clear when we're looking at our friends across the pond and seeing the echoes here at home. And I think that we should listen to people like Corbyn who are saying, hey, be cautious of Burnham, because while he seems to be the better option to Starmer in the moment against, Reform UK and Restore Britain, Burnham still largely backs the austerity politics and policies of Starmer that led people to wanting to find alternatives such as Restore UK and or Reform UK and Restore Britain. So when we're looking at this, 6 in 10 Brits feel that this cost of living crisis will never end. So I don't know that putting all our eggs in the Burnham Labour Party basket that is still going to continue the austerity politics of Starmer is really the solution that I think Britons are looking for. And that's just going to lead to discontent after Burnham inevitably in the first 100 days loses confidence because he also cannot speak to this cost of living crisis.
Well, so Michael, this guy, he calls himself like a business socialist or something, which I don't know what that even is that that's such a thing that exists. But to Sierra's point, he may still continue these austerity policies that have been in place in Britain, since the Thatcher era. Is this guy going to last longer than a head of lettuce?
That I don't know, but you hope that the voter sentiment of a step in the right direction in name or in thought, whether they're actually going to carry out some of those policies, you hope that is sending a signal. You hope it sends a signal there and here at home that we can continue down that path, even though it will likely be small steps, because for whatever reason we cling back to what seems safe, although it's not if you look at the economics of what's going on around the world. But we're hard to give up on our on that kind of elite lineage.
Well, Thatcherism is from the 90s, and so the austerity politics have been here and in place since the 90s. So for 30 years, we have been waiting and seeing how this will turn out. It's not. And so having yes, the signaling to incremental change is great, but the problem is if Labour wants to beat fascist Reform UK or the uglier version Restore Britain, then parties like Labour or like the Green Party are going to have to actually enact bold legislation that speaks to the material conditions of everyday Britons. Otherwise, just signaling in this small incremental change is what lost confidence among Britons in Starmer. 6 in 10 Britons still feel like the cost of living crisis will never end. So,
wait, are we talking Indiana politics or?
Right, exactly.
Echoes here.
And so, yes, and we can often see that our brothers and sisters across the pond are like the canary in our coal mine. So we would be apt to look at them and see that, yes, we do not need more incremental change and signaling. What we really need is real economic policies that are popular and that work to speak to the material conditions of working class peoples all over the globe, because yes, we do see this as a global trend, not just in the UK and not just in the US.
Right. To connect that back to Greenspan, we talked about it. Those policies that he championed, that upward funneling of wealth from the working class to the upper classes, that led to the anger that has given us in this country Trump, and has given the UK Nigel Farage, and even worse, Restore Britain, if you can imagine. So let us talk about the American version of this. I want to come back stateside here. And, real quick, in addition to the UK special election last week, in which Burnham won, Colombia held a presidential runoff, and Trump-aligned Abelardo de la Espriella narrowly won, continuing a series of right-wing victories in Latin America. But to our country here. So, of course, we've seen the US and UK reflect each other many times over the last several decades. Reagan following Thatcher, Blair following Clinton, Brexit foreshadowing Trump's first election. Is this the end of a Blairite Labour Party? And does that portend the end of a Clintonite Democratic Party here? Please God. Tuesday's New York primaries provide an encouraging sign that we may be headed in a better direction. Big Apple Mayor Zoran Mamdani endorsed 3 progressive challengers in competitive congressional primaries, and all 3 won, 2 unseating sitting Democrats. The biggest upset, 32-year-old Democratic Socialist organizer Daria Liza Avila Chevalier narrowly defeated 5-term Representative Adriano Espaillat, chair of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus. Brad Lander decisively beat 2-term Representative Dan Goldman, and Claire Valdez won in the open 7th district, defeating the hand-picked successor of retiring Nydia Velázquez. And establishment Democrats lost their goddamn minds. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries said Mamdani, quote, has work to do to make up with congressional Democrats. New York Attorney General Letitia James said she was disappointed in Mamdani, and that his endorsed candidates, quote, do not understand the politics of New York City, the cultural differences from district to district, end quote. She went on to say, all of us are a little frustrated with the Democratic Party, but you don't blow it up. That's what MAGA has done. And former DNC chairman Jamie Harrison took to Twitter to pout, saying, quote, I say this with no ill will or animosity. If you hate the Democratic Party, then please don't run for our nomination. Michael, now we're talking about New York elections here, but I feel like this particular fight hits close to home for you.
Yeah, it's a little close. It's what we've been dealing with, getting involved with the party over the last few years, and it's tough because certainly me respect what it must be like carrying the party through 20 years of exile in Indiana and beyond. Right at the convention, the Indiana State Convention a couple of weeks ago. We had a delegate that had been voting at the convention for, I believe she was in the realm of 60 years or 60 conventions. That can't be right. 30 conventions, 60 years. 30 conventions, 60 years.
It was 84 years ago.
And there's something to be said, but then look at what the voters are saying, and then what more. I hate to use the word progressive. Is the ones that are listening to the people are saying that they want change, they want this kind of change, and then we need to be able to then provide. If we get these candidates that are winning, Mamdani seems to be getting things done like he said he could do. If we freed up money by having better policy and just looking at the books and not embezzling or being crooked with things, we can get stuff done. And that part of my platform is getting the government back to work for the people, and hope that's where we can head.
And Sierra, like Tish James said, that these Democratic Socialists do not understand the politics of New York, the cultural differences from district to districts. They won. They must.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting. The vote blue no matter who crowd says it until it's a progressive. And then they come down on high and say, well, you guys just don't understand the district, the voters, the base, the people. Democracy played out. The voters, elected these people. Clearly, they do speak to some portion of the electorate, right? So, another thing that Tisha James said that I get so frustrated by this reform it, don't blow it up argument, because I think of it more like a house renovation. And it feels like the base is saying that there is mold in the house, that the subfloor is shifted, that the foundation, there's structural issues here. And what the establishment essentially is offering us is they will come in and put a fresh coat of paint on all the interior walls. And it's like, right, that's cool, but that doesn't really speak to the issues that we are seeing here, that the base is telling you. There's structural issues, there's rot. So like putting paint on the walls doesn't do much. And I also think that it is just so interesting that we frame it like, well, you're just blowing it up. No, you can have a full renovation of the inside of the home and leave the home itself intact. Nobody in their rational mind thinks that just because you do a full gutting of the interior of your home, that means you actually just blew up the home and replaced the home with something entirely new. We can reform it from the inside and not be called radicals who are blowing it up. You also can't have your cake and eat it too. You cannot tell democratic socialists, progressives, whatever you want to call the left wing of the base, you cannot say that if you just take your ball and go home, if you don't like the Democrats, don't have anything to do with us. But then when we complain and say, hey, there's structural issues within the party, you come back and say, well, are you involved? Do you get involved as the county chairs? Do you get involved as a delegate? Do you get involved anywhere in your party? Well, which is it? Do you want Democrats and democratic socialists and progressives to get involved and change it from the inside out? Or do you want us to take our ball and go home? You can't have it both ways.
Yeah, and then when you do come in, like you work and work and work and work, and inevitably, some gatekeeper is going to put their hand on your head and keep you at a distance when you get too close to power. Michael, Chris Murphy's clapped back at Harrison on Twitter and said, I don't know, man, who is the Democratic Party if not the voters? Democratic voters choose candidates, not party leaders, and party leaders need to listen to what voters are telling us. And right now they are demanding our party be bolder. Thoughts about that?
I'm all for being bold. Yes, I think that's what really, again, take it or leave it. Trump has been bold. I mean, it's kind of his thing, and I don't agree. I think he's bold in all the wrong ways and bold about things that he can't carry out. But he's bold. He's like, and that's what people want to hear. They want to hear a leader that's going to take them by the hand and go this way, even though there's supposed to be three branches of government for the working with the president. So how far they can lead, as a representative. I like to say, you're my leader to the people. I'm not your leader. I'm supposed to represent you and then help structure law that help Hoosiers. So, maybe we need to rethink in government what we're looking to as a leader when they're in the party and in the apparatus somehow versus what real leadership is and what their job is.
I liked Sierra's metaphor about the house, which I have also used before. I have done this. I have been under a house. We have lifted up a house and worked under the structural issues while the people were still living inside it. You can do this. But I've got another grosser metaphor for you, and it is like the establishments of both parties for the last 40, 50 years, for the neoliberal era that we've been talking about, have been serving us austerity and funneling money up to the upper classes. They have both been serving us a turd sandwich. And the turd sandwich company serves two products, much in the way that Hardee's and Carl Jr. are the exact same thing, depending on what part of the country you're in. In some places, they serve a turd sandwich wrapped in a Confederate flag that says "Make America Great Again" on it. And in some places, they serve a turd sandwich with a pride flag on it. Very inclusive, right? And the one side, they'll say, if you don't want to eat the Confederate flag turd sandwich, that you hate America and you hate God. And the other side will say, if you don't want to eat their turd sandwich, you're a racist and an anti-queer bigot. I don't know, man. maybe we're just tired of eating turd sandwiches. And Donald Trump went out there, he's been doing this for the last 10 years. He said, I'm going to serve you something other than a turd sandwich. And people are like, oh, that's great. Turns out he's serving you the biggest turd sandwich imaginable. I don't know. Whatever. I'm not hungry anymore.
I definitely think people are hungry for something other than a crap sandwich. And I think that you can see that honestly in the Obama to Trump voters, because Obama was also offering you some bold policy, some hope and change. And yes, it didn't come to fruition. It lays the groundwork for someone like Trump, who comes in and offers bold change and says that they will speak to the economic woes of the working class people. My in-laws were Obama Trump voters for that exact reason. They wanted the economic hope and change of Obama. They didn't get it. They were disillusioned. And so they moved to Trump, who also, to Michael's point, people want something bold. They want to know that there is somebody fighting for them. And so when the Democrats don't try to put forth any kind of left-wing economic populist policies as like at the very least, a release valve to the pressure that is building under the failures of neoliberalism, then what you are actually doing is laying the groundwork for someone like Trump, a right-wing economic populist, to come in and sell people snake oil, which is what he has done twice now. And the Democrats are still not understanding what it is that the base is really wanting. They aren't wanting a turd sandwich wrapped in a pride flag. They are starting to wake up to the 2016 Hillary Clinton, James Carville theory of, well, what does, breaking up big banks have to do with solving racism? Bernie's over here talking about big banks and breaking up Wall Street, and that's bullshit. What we really need to talk about is sexism and racism. Am I right, guys? Yeah, that's 2016. Now we're here in 2026, and we're literally poised to do the same thing when truly the base and the American electorate is tired of the turd sandwich. They see for what it is. It's a uniparty, and we're just not in it. It's not looking out for us.
Hopefully these elections Tuesday are a sign of things to come, that folks in the party like Murphy, who is kind of an establishment guy, is starting to get it. So let us move on. There were some other elections on Tuesday in South Carolina. Attorney General Alan Wilson defeated Trump-endorsed Lieutenant Governor Pamela Yvette. Trump had hedged his bets late in the race by saying he supported both candidates after his preferred gubernatorial picks lost in Iowa and Georgia earlier this month, a pattern suggesting his endorsement power in governor's races is weaker than in congressional primaries. And in Utah, former Representative Ben McAdams won the Utah Democratic primary in a redrawn Salt Lake City area district that Democrats are favored to win this fall. But I want to move on to the kind of sort of on hold war with Iran, where this week has been a mirror image of recent weeks. Recall many times over the course of the last couple months, we've seen these skirmishes break out during the week. Trump announced a deal was imminent, and then Israel go on a rampage in Lebanon at the end of the week, blowing up any negotiations for a permanent end to hostilities. Well, last weekend, we had the official signing of a 60-day memorandum of understanding between the two sides. Vice President J.D. Vance traveled to Switzerland for 2 days of negotiations, and a ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah held for longer than at any point since the beginning of the war. But by the end of the week, Iran had attacked a pair of vessels traversing the Strait of Hormuz using a U.S.-backed route hugging the Omani coast, drawing retaliatory U.S. strikes on Iranian military sites, and escalatory drone attacks on Bahrain and Kuwait by the Islamic Republic. The fragile 60-day peace looks to be hanging by a thread. Only a week in, Sierra. Previously, it had been Israel throwing a wrench in any negotiations. This week, they've at least symbolically signed an agreement to end fighting and withdraw from parts of Lebanon, while Iran appears to have struck out first this time. What's going on here?
Well, I'd just like to caveat with Israel has not withdrawn from Lebanon. They've left their tanks there to antagonize Hezbollah and the Lebanese people. The Lebanese are still not able to return to their homes. And so they're still occupying the south of Lebanon. That's very much still going on. The Iranians bombing a tanker is not ideal, obviously. This being a clusterfuck is to be expected when you have incompetent fools like Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump running the show.
And master negotiators like Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff, who probably gave away the Strait of Hormuz to Iran, and now they're like, hey, guys, we had an agreement. You're violating it. I don't know. I don't know if we've seen the full text.
Well, the art of the deal, we've negotiated the JCPOA. And yes, we gave away a little cookie of Iran now knows that it has leverage over the Strait of Hormuz. And at any time, it can just go ahead and close down the waterway. And that will throw a wrench in the global economy. So it's problematic all around. But it is incredibly frustrating to me that Israel could not find an American president stupid enough to go to war with Iran. Not in Bush and Donald Rumsfeld and Dick Cheney. Those three they weren't stupid enough to do this. But the Trump administration, this one's ready.
Yeah. And then, so with all of this as the backdrop, of course, at a point when it looked like this peace might hold, on Tuesday, the U.S. Senate voted 50-48 on a war powers resolution to cut off U.S. military action in Iran without congressional authorization. The same four Republicans that had been breaking ranks with Trump continued to do so, while Democrat in name only John Fetterman voted with the GOP. After 10 attempts to rein in Trump on this war, the resolution passed because 2 Republican senators were absent, Pennsylvania's Dave McCormick and the hospitalized Mitch McConnell. Get well never. Wednesday, the president traveled to Capitol Hill for a closed-door lunch with GOP senators, which devolved into a shouting match with one of the 4 holdouts, lame duck Louisiana Senator Bill Cassidy. Lo and behold, later that evening, Cassidy switched his vote, and Kentucky Senator Rand Paul voted present in walking back their resolution from just 24 hours earlier. Michael, Cassidy lost his primary earlier this year to a Trump-endorsed challenger. He's on his way out. He's got nothing to lose. He physically stood up to Trump Wednesday afternoon, but by that evening, he backed down. Why?
Who knows? Some type of intimidation. Again, he's already out, so I don't wish this on anyone, but we've seen the tactics that have gone on. It's only maybe days away from the what do they call the FBI raids, swatting. Somebody swats this guy's house, and then you go through that stuff. We've seen that kind of play out, so. I don't understand the politics of it. If somebody got to him, but to go, you would almost expect it to be the opposite after getting voted out. So, I don't know. It's politics.
It feels like kabuki theater to me. It just, Congress is out to lunch. Trump wants this war. He is benefiting off the oil futures and making money on the side. So is Witkoff. So is Jared Kushner. Yeah. Everybody's making something here. Everyone has something to gain, except for the Iranian people, the American people, the Lebanese people. It's always the oligarchs and the people in power who benefit from war, and the rest of us who suffer.
Every time there's a left turn in this thing, somebody is profiting off of this for sure. So let's
almost the vote almost doesn't matter. It's like 50-50 essentially. So Trump can see that they can't make up their mind anyway. So I'm going to probably do what I want regardless. So
I really think the linchpin in this is still really that Israel just wants Lebanon, and because Iran continues to make this a red line, that you cannot just occupy Lebanon for your buffer zone or breathing space, as they famously called it in the 30s and 40s when the Germans needed breathing space in Poland, so they just went ahead and invaded and annexed Poland. We're seeing the same thing in Lebanon. They're literally calling it the same thing. They need breathing space. They need a buffer zone in the south of Lebanon, a sovereign country. And so when Iran makes that a red line and Israel says, no, we are not taking our troops out. We, in fact, want Americans to continue to fight the war in Iran so we can continue to fight in Lebanon to get access to the Litani River, but also the gas field that is worth millions of dollars that sits in the south of Lebanon, because Israel doesn't have that. So they need that. So this is just a war of land grabs and occupation. So I don't think that the Iran war is going to end anytime soon, so long as they remain in Al-Sham.
Yeah, so let's talk about what else happened at the Capitol on Wednesday, and maybe even the bigger story than Trump's tantrum and Cassidy's caving was that Trump's tantrum blew up the only decent thing the Republican majority Congress has passed in his second term. Trump announced via Truth Social that he would not sign the bipartisan 21st Century Road to Housing Act, as Speaker Mike Johnson was holding a press conference to praise the legislation, and the signing ceremony was imminent. The bill, authored by Democrat Elizabeth Warren and Republican Tim Scott, passed both chambers overwhelmingly and included streamlined environmental reviews and construction permits, limits on corporate landlords buying single-family homes, expanded manufactured housing loans, funding to convert abandoned infrastructure into housing, expanded rental assistance, and new renter protections. While home prices are up 54% since 2020, the median home now costs nearly 5 times the median household income, and rents are still 17% above pre-pandemic levels. The housing market is stuck near a 30-year low for sales. Trump's demand: he won't sign the housing bill unless Congress also passes the SAVE Act, which we'll talk about shortly. But first, Michael, the man has always been an immature buffoon, but in his dotage, he's completely devolved into a tantruming toddler, hasn't he?
As always, sorry, you may hear some dogs barking in the background. He has one tactic, and it's being a bully. And, I haven't read his books, but that's all we see as president, is that there is no tactic to his negotiation. It's I bully him, I use, my bully power of money or war power or just, being the head of the United States, and I'm going to bowl over people. And if I don't get my way, I have no other recourse. I have no other plan but to yell. And it's just old. It's not a way to get anything done. It's boring at this point, and the guy needs to go.
And Sierra, listen, this housing bill is not perfect by any stretch, but we really need the federal government to do something about housing, don't we?
Not only do we need it, I think the irony of this bill has so many provisions from Trump's executive order that he passed for affordable housing back in March, I believe. So the irony of him being likely to veto a bill that has legislation that would codify his executive order, it really speaks to the kind of con man that Trump is. I know everyone here already knew that, but I think given the cost
of Kangles,
yes. And given the cost of living crisis and the fact that nearly my entire generation has been just locked out of home ownership, the fact that is what's driving the DSA's popularity, the thing that is pissing Trump off the most, when inequality rises and institutions fail, people inevitably start looking to either direction for some kind of big substantive change. So if he really wanted to take the wind out of the sails of the Democratic Socialists, then he would sign this sort of legislation as a pressure valve, a release valve of sorts. And he's not a political operator. No one's ever accused him of being politically savvy. So.
Yeah. And so let's talk about why Trump not vetoed. It's still out there for him to sign, and he's expected to still sign this maybe after he, has a nap and gets his binky. But the reason Trump pulled his approval from this housing bill is over the SAVE Act. And I'm not sure what the acronym actually stands for, but the SAVE Act should be referred to as the Suppression and Voter Elimination Act. It would require photo ID for in-person voting and a copy of photo ID submitted with mail ballots, mandate states turn over complete unredacted voter rolls to the Department of Homeland Security, require the purging of alleged non-citizens, and create criminal penalties against election officials who register voters without citizenship documents. Now, the entire premise is based on a false claim, right? Trump thinks the bill would ensure Republicans never lose another election for 50 years because he believes Democrats only win due to non-citizen voting, which the Bipartisan Policy Center and election experts describe as extremely rare, like 100 cases across 4 billion votes over the last 40 years rare. A fraction of a fraction of a percent. Senate Majority Leader John Thune has said repeatedly that he doesn't have the votes to pass this thing. Sierra, we all know what the SAVE Act is. It is a war on legal voters, particularly women, under the guise of fighting voter fraud, which is all but non-existent. Go off.
Yeah, it is a solution in search of a problem. Honestly, we don't really need this. The amount of election fraud, non-citizens voting is so statistically insignificant, it's not worth taxpayer time and mental bandwidth to even be discussing it. The other reason that Republicans aren't really on board with this is because Grampy just keeps loading it down with things that don't matter. I think there is a provision against gender reassignment for youth. What the hell does trans issues have to do with voting or the SAVE Act? I don't know what the acronym is either, but Shahstus Marhaba. What does SALT have to do with hello? Like, these two things don't have anything to do with each other. So you're just loading down this bill and trying to get all of your BS legislation into this SAVE Act under the guise of trying to have election integrity, which is red meat to his base. But even the Republicans in Congress aren't buying the bullshit. So
a real grab bag of bull from Trump here. And, you know, Michael, listen, Trump is still in his feelings about losing 2020, continuing to claim the election was rigged. Here he is, openly attempting to rig this year's election right before our eyes.
Yeah, as we can see, it's just another propaganda piece for Republicans to use to discourage voters, to discourage certain groups from even trying to go to the polls, and get some eliminated potentially last minute here as we head towards midterm elections in November. Like, if I can question or get even one voter purged, in states like Indiana, who are very favorable to this, they're doing everything they can to win favor and causing all kinds of problems and people getting purged here as we run up to the election, and then they have to scramble to get votes in. So, we're here. We want to encourage voting. And they're always trying to suppress it with no data, right? And they use all these stats, and we've done an audit, and they tell us about the audit. Well, your audit found 4 people in 20 years. I don't think that's a problem, but they keep calling it a problem. Yeah, and they have to keep this in the news because they've had luck with that, that propaganda and getting elected.
It's a fantastic.
Well, Sierra, are like, by continuing to even talk about this and bring up, again, we just by debunking this voter fraud conspiracy, we're talking about voter fraud, and does that help him, what we're doing here?
I honestly don't know where to land with Trump in combating the lies, because it feels like a never-ending battle. We just are constantly playing whack-a-mole with the lies, and it feels like as we're trying to hit the election fraud, which we have been beating this drum for 6 years now, and I just think it can't be the main focus. We cannot spend the election cycle coming up focusing on combating election fraud charges. We've got to start taking a more Mamdani approach. When they start talking about election fraud, we need to immediately just divert to, well, it's statistically insignificant, but do you know what taxpayer time and dollars could be better spent on? Fixing roads and bridges, bringing up worker wages, having affordable childcare, things like that, and trying to redirect this conversation, because for 6 years we've been talking about election integrity. And I just think that if we haven't changed enough hearts and minds in 6 years, maybe it's time to start focusing on more economic issues and talking to people about that and redirecting the conversation, because this just feels like a losing battle. We can't focus on this. People don't go to the ballot box and aren't inspired to go to the ballot box because they're worried about election integrity and voter fraud in the way that I think that both sides try to make it sound like we are. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I should mention that, the SAVE Act isn't the only front in the war on voting. A federal judge on Thursday blocked key pillars of Trump's second election executive order, ruling the federal government has no constitutional authority to create centralized lists of adult citizens, or give the Postal Service power to decide who receives mail ballots. The order had directed DHS and Social Security to build a nationwide verified citizen list and for USPS to only deliver mail ballots to voters on pre-approved federal lists. The day before the ruling, the Trump-appointed Postmaster General had explicitly said the agency would refuse delivery to voters not on those lists. So good news out of the courts on the mail-in voting. Also good news in another federal court on Tuesday as a judge issued a nationwide ban on immigration arrests inside courthouses, ruling the Trump administration's reversal of an 80-year policy against such arrests showed not merely unseasoned decision-making, but a complete lack of decision-making. That's a quote. I would argue their disregard for laws, norms, and basic human decency was very much intentional. Now, the good news out of the judicial branch ends there, though, as the Supreme Court dropped a series of horrific decisions this week, ruling 6-3 on Thursday to allow the Trump administration to end temporary protected status for Haitian and Syrian nationals, holding that the TPS statute's bar on judicial review is broad enough to block courts from second-guessing the secretary's termination decision. While the U.S. Law prohibits racially discriminatory government actions, the majority decision written by Justice Samuel Alito dismissed the president's highly offensive statements about Haitians eating pets, calling Haiti a, quote, shithole country, and claiming Haitians, quote, probably have AIDS, as heated language that was not overtly racial and could rest on policy grounds unrelated to race. Elena Kagan's dissent, joined by Sotomayor and Jackson, was pointed. Those statements, quote, fairly shout in their racial undertones and overtones alike that race entered into the president's resolve to remove Haitians from this country. And she noted the majority declined to even put Trump's words in print. Michael, the majority decision in this TPS case, the Trump's revocation of protected status rested on non-racial policy grounds, strains credulity. This court is clearly just making shit up as they go along at this point.
Yeah, kudos to the Republican Party for implanting so many judges, including the Supreme Court, but up and down state courts, federal courts, and it just goes to show, as we work day by day, voter by voter, we need to continue to look at every office and putting them in place, because change starts one at a time, and eventually it becomes so pervasive that we're able to get influence policy. In this case, it's not what we like, and really it's not constitutional, I would say. Even what the Supreme Court is ruling in some cases, it's crazy, and it's terrible. And it's along the same lines of this. They have to create this boogeyman, this propaganda to tell everybody what's wrong with voting or what's wrong with my policy is bad because there's all these illegal voters, and so I have to have bad policy, which is all a bunch of nonsense. And it's just more of the grift that we get from those in power right now.
100%. And on the same day, listen, the Supreme Court was on one. They're playing all the hits. The court allowed the Trump administration to turn back asylum seekers at official ports of entry, ruling that physically blocking people from setting foot on U.S. soil to request asylum does not violate federal immigration law. Newsflash, it does. The case addressed a now-defunct metering policy from Trump's first term, but the ruling has immediate implications. It effectively gives the executive branch authority to override the statutory requirement that officials inspect all people presenting at ports of entry, a requirement in place for over a century. The practical consequences are this: people turned back at the border are forced to remain in Mexico or return to the dangers they fled. Advocates say the original policy resulted in deaths, and the ruling now validates that approach going forward. Sierra, asylum is a foundational principle of international law. Illegal wars, kidnapping foreign leaders, executing alleged drug runners at sea without a trial, and now this, we are a rogue nation, are we not?
Yes, I would argue that we are a rogue nation, a rogue terror state. I mean, I would say, just because I think I just want to really quickly connect it back to the voting story. We are so far through the looking glass that SCOTUS, the majority, and Samuel Alito thinks that this take of Haitian and Syrian refugees is not racist, but the creation of majority minority districts to try to ensure representation for Black Americans, that is racism. That's racism. Telling people that they should go back to their shithole countries because they're perfectly safe, but also shitholes, is not racism. That's where we are in Samuel Alito's SCOTUS of 2026. I also, you brought up international law. I just want to also remind people that international humanitarian law and protection for asylum seekers comes directly after the Holocaust. In 1939, over 900 Jewish refugees were aboard the MS St. Louis, and they were turned away by the United States government, and they met their fate back in Germany. We as a government decided, we as an international community decided never again, right? And this is where you get a lot of these Geneva Conventions, humanitarian law, crimes against humanity, war crimes, the like. Congress here at home passed the Refugees Act in 1980. We wanted to prevent from making the same mistakes that we made in 1939 with the MS St. Louis. We didn't want to just continue to send people back, refugees back, because of their because of the issues that they are facing in their home country. It is important that even though Tom Homan says that, I think he said that Assad is gone, Syria is safe, 6,000 Syrians do not want to go back to Syria under Jalani's or Sharar's, rule. Yes, Assad was a brutal dictator. His family had ruled for 50 years plus years in Syria. He is known as the Butcher of Damascus. He is absolutely not a good guy. He was also an Alawite, which is a religious minority. And so when people are a grab bag, and so for all his faults, the one thing he did positive was preventing sectarian violence from breaking out because he is from a religious minority. You do not have the same in Sharar or Jalani. He is an ex-Al-Qaeda fighter. So yeah, he is a religious extremist, and it's not really surprising to me, or to I think anyone who pays attention to U.S. Middle East politics over the last several decades, to see us propping up a religious fundamentalist in the Middle East. And I'm nervous to see what blowback we see from that in 20 years, but also we are so far from seeing a Syria that is stable and safe to go back to. I absolutely want to go back and see Damascus, see where my grandparents are from. I do not think that is safe right now. The country is still reeling. People are still trying to find loved ones in prisons where Assad, disappeared people. The country is still reeling and trying to put itself back together. And I imagine the same can be said about Haiti. But these people are also so short-sighted in their white supremacy that they don't recognize that Syrians and Haitians, they make up a lot of the healthcare sector. And we already, post-COVID, have a healthcare industry full of professionals who are reeling. They are tired, they're burnt out, and they're not making enough money. And so now we are going to, just for the point of cruelty and racism, send back people who are willing to be in our healthcare system and fill these gaps. That it just feels like we're cutting off our nose to spite our face.
And we have to keep in mind that the root of all these things were U.S. and allied intervention in places like Syria and Haiti for decades, if not centuries, there, causing these problems that make people want to flee, and then we deny them a safe valve to get out of these places that we disrupted. So let's move on, and from turning the government against vulnerable refugees and asylum seekers to weaponizing the government against American citizens. A very ominous ruling out of a federal court in Texas Tuesday, where 9 activists convicted of terrorism charges stemming from a 4th of July protest last year at Prairieland ICE Immigration Detention Center received sentences ranging from 30 to 100 years. Sentences a former federal prosecutor called far outside the normal range, noting judges typically run counts concurrently rather than stacking them consecutively, as happened here. These sentences far exceed those handed out to January 6th seditious conspiracy convicts. Proud Boys leader Enrique Tarrio got 22 years. Oath Keepers leader Stuart Rhodes, 18. The longest sentence in this case, 100 years, went to Benjamin Song, who fired an AR-15, hitting a police officer in the shoulder after the officer drew his weapon and pointed it at the back of a fleeing protester. Listen, we're not advocating shooting at cops, okay? But the material support for terrorism convictions swept up other defendants with vastly different levels of involvement, including one man who wasn't at the protest at all, but was convicted for moving his wife's books and zines after her arrest. He received 30 years. These are the first terrorism convictions tied to alleged Antifa involvement, notable because Antifa is not a real organization, but a loose constellation of left-wing views. Sierra, if publishing anti-fascist material makes one a terrorist, I suppose our arrest is imminent.
Yes, and this all comes out of a National Security Presidential Memorandum 7, NSPM 7. It is a memorandum that says that essentially anyone that holds anti-capitalist, anti-traditionalist, anti-American views will be seen as a domestic terrorist and a threat to the national security of the United States. I hate to bring this again back to the war on terror, but like you can see this as the direct result of policies that came out of the war on terror. The material support for terrorism being used against domestic citizens here in the United States. We saw that in Dearborn, Michigan, with the highest Arab American population, Muslim population in the early 2000s. People who were just sending money back home to help their loved ones and their relatives were flagged as having been, having supported and aided and abetted terrorists because they are just simply sending money back to Gaza, the West Bank, Syria. So you can see a direct through line between these two things. And I think it is jarring to see protesters to see the federal government be weaponized against protesters, against Americans for their views, for their speech, for their constitutional right to protest. I just want people to remember that we saw this in 2023 with the Palestinian encampments. This is why we said it was so important. When you put an asterisk, and I think Americans are finally starting to wake up to the realities that a lot of us in this activist space knew. When you have an asterisk on free speech, you can free speech to say, fuck the US government, fuck the Iranian government. The moment that you start speaking out against Israel and you start speaking in favor of Palestine, they start coming after you. They start taking away certain things. They start, you have your Canary Mission is a website where they will dox you and have employers stop you from being able to get jobs, where you will have universities stop you from being able to get degrees or continue on at their university because they view you as a threat. When you have an asterisk on free speech, you are creating a permission structure for someone like Trump, who does not have any scruples about putting a Mack truck through it. So while Biden administration was saying, it's just Palestine, we just don't want you talking about, pro-Palestinian causes, stop with that. The Trump administration said, okay, well, they're, stress tested. The American people are okay with that. And they actually, they allowed the Biden administration to do it. I'm going to drive a Mack truck through that. Now we're just going to do it for whatever political dissent I don't like. And so it's important that when you try to uphold the principles of free speech, that we uphold it for even speech you may not agree with.
And, I gave a speech around last it was around last Halloween because I did it in costume at a rally for Brad Meyer, and I invoked Spartacus. And if you ever seen the movie with Kirk Douglas, they all stand up and say, I am Spartacus, right? You can't arrest the real Spartacus if everybody's Spartacus. Well, they can't arrest Antifa if we're all Antifa. So I think it's important for all of us who stand against fascism to say, yeah, we're all Antifa. What are they going to do? Arrest all of us? Michael, these sentences cannot possibly stand on appeal, can they?
We just talked about getting judges in place, and all these offices in place to allow these things to happen. So I don't put anything past any judge these days, but they have a mission by whatever name you want to call it, and they are going down that path, and we have to hold the line firm and say this isn't going to happen. We are Spartacus, link arms, and stand firm, because it's going to continue in this direction if we don't.
Even if these cases don't have any real weight behind them or don't see convictions, it does have a chilling effect. It does scare regular people into not wanting to maybe participate because they don't want to risk a lawsuit, even because if you're litigating, you're losing money. And normal people don't have lawyers on retention. They don't have legal funds. So this isn't something that normal people want to put their butt on the line for. So that's, I think, even if they don't see convictions, what they will see is a chilling effect. And you can even see that again in someone like a Mahmoud Khalil. Sure, if we're all Spartacus, you can't take us, but they did take Mahmoud Khalil. And even if they don't get a conviction or it's overturned, he was still traumatized. Romezia Ozturk, who just signed an op-ed in Tufts University's student newspaper. She wrote an op-ed just suggesting that Tufts University boycott, divest, and sanction the state of Israel for their war crimes. She was thrown into a detention camp in Louisiana and was just disappeared off of the streets and was traumatized. She does not want to ever return to the United States. She thinks that we are a scary place to be that does not value human rights or freedoms. And that is a terrifying turn of events. So even if we don't see a conviction, I think that the message that the Trump administration is trying to make is crystal clear. We were willing to crack down on Palestine. The Biden administration was willing to crack down on Palestine. Trump is willing to crack down on anything. And if we continue to let it happen, yes, it will just get progressively worse, because anti-American, anti-traditional, and anti-capitalist values, anti-Christian values, that is most of America. I mean,
yeah, and it's whatever they say it is, right? Like the Supreme Court is just making up terms as they go, and the government is making up terms as they go. Yeah, so let's of lesser severity, but on the same thread, the Trump administration has also now arrested 7 people on vandalism charges in conjunction with the disastrous renovation at the Lincoln Memorial Reflecting Pool. Now, as we know, Trump awarded a no-bid contract to a political ally to coat the pool with an American flag blue liner leading up to the country's 250th birthday. The dark color caused the water in the pool to overheat, resulting in an algae bloom. Efforts to chemically combat the bloom likely damaged the coating if it had even been applied correctly in the first place. Individuals have now been arrested for touching or taking pieces of the cracked and peeled coating that had floated to the surface, including a former U.S. Olympian. Despite Trump's claims that someone cut the pool liner with a box knife, leaving a 100, no, 200, no, 350-foot gash, no evidence of vandalism exists. The president is threatening to sue ABC News over their coverage of the Reflecting Pool debacle. And this is his second lawsuit threat against ABC, which already paid him $16 million to settle a previous defamation suit. ABC is running on-air ads during The View, urging viewers to submit public comments to the FCC in support of the network as it faces 2 simultaneous FCC investigations, one into whether The View violated equal time rules for political candidates, and a broader challenge to its license renewals for 8 network-owned local stations. Now, Michael, this Reflecting Pool thing has, I think, because it's right there, it's in Washington, it's a national monument, it's very much a metaphor for the entire Trump administration ruining everything it touches. That has sort of sucked all the oxygen out of the room, or the algae sucked all the oxygen out of the pool, I don't know. And so we're not talking about things like the last case, which was far more consequential.
Yeah, again, well, one, he's got to cover up his folly, and it's always a grift. It's always been just admit you're wrong. Like, again, Trump will never admit he was wrong. And he has the best contractors and the best of everything. So we all get to suffer listening to this old people. Man. Yeah. Just grumble about being an old man. It's like, I hate to be that way. I'm an old man myself. And, but it's just like, and I know I can be stubborn, and thankfully I have people to pull me out of that, but somebody's got to pull this guy out of his own.
The Simpsons meme, right? Old man yells at cloud. Old man yells at algae.
Yes.
Sierra, this the threats against ABC, again, this is a recurring pattern with him, goes back to what you said on the last story. It's a chilling effect. The goal is to get these the media organizations, to get the free press to fall into line. Is Mickey Mouse the biggest capitalist on the planet, our class traitor hero?
I hate to say that they would be a class traitor hero, because absolutely not. Anything that they follow the bottom line, whatever benefits the House of Mouse is going to happen. But Trump is such an unoriginal bastard. I'm sorry. Like, this is just textbook authoritarianism. I mean, he's just following the footsteps of right-wing despots like Erdogan in Turkey, or like Rodrigo Duterte in the Philippines. I mean, lawfare was used to shut down and silence journalists and critics of Duterte's regime, specifically his regime of targeting alleged drug dealers and carrying out extrajudicial killings, just blatant murders of Filipino citizens, and leaving their bodies on the streets in the name of law and order. It's a war crime. It's a crime against humanity. Yeah. And it seems like Donald Trump is really just wants to follow in Duterte's footsteps, not just in trying to co-opt the media and sue them into oblivion, but also in extrajudicial killings. So.
And Michael, they always said, that it can't happen here. We have the Constitution, we have freedom of speech, and what's going on. Trump is using the levers of capitalism to stifle freedom of speech. You can still say whatever you want, but is that going to affect your bottom line?
Yeah, well, as long as it affects his, so he can, insider trade or, get the word out to his buddies. Nobody minds a tanking market when you're going to be able to buy a bunch of stock from it and then sell it high or 30 minutes later. So go ahead.
That's why the Philippines example is so apt, because yes, it's the lawfare is being used against the newspapers and the journalists in the same way that Trump is using lawfare against ABC. Yes, it is the capitalist approach. And even though we have Constitution and freedom of speech, so does the Philippines. They literally also have a Constitution and freedom of speech. So this is, again, he is an unoriginal bastard. He's not intelligent by any means. He just has to look around and find what fits his model. And he probably isn't even the person doing that. He just presses a red button that gets his Diet Coke, and the dude who brings his Diet Coke says, and he tells him, go find somewhere that this works. And they found the Philippines, because exactly this model. Duterte gets democratically elected. He comes in, does a massive power grab through democratic and constitutional means, and then uses these levers of power and capitalism to weaponize the fourth institution, the media, and it so ensues the power grab and the descent into fascism and dictatorship in the Philippines. And there is a fantastic journalist, Maria Rodrigo, I believe, who does work on this and tries to so hard to wake up Americans and say, look, we are the canary in the coal mine. You're not even paying attention. And I think that we are well and truly down the path that Maria had laid out like 5 years ago now. So it's just disheartening to see.
The moral of the story is that we here in America are not nearly as special as we think we are, and we can fall prey to the same techniques and the same currents that happen in the rest of the world. So let us take 45 seconds and hear from our friends down at Crossroad Commons in Salem, Indiana, and we'll come back on the other side and start digging into our Indiana stories this week.
Crossroads Commons in Salem, Indiana, headquartered in a historic Salem home, is holding a fundraiser to expand via the purchase of the 3/4-acre lot of land adjacent to their facility. Please consider donating or spread the word so that they can further expand their services to the community. Scan the QR code on your screen for a direct link to the donation page and help us buy the grass.
All right. Great stuff there out of Salem and our friend Renee down there with Crossroad Commons. They're doing great work. Help them out. Only a couple weeks left on that fundraising push from them. So let us turn to a segment I like to call the Crossroads, where U.S. and Indiana news intersect. So a DOJ Office of Legal Counsel memo late last week quietly reversed nearly 50 years of bipartisan federal policy by arguing that states have no legal obligation to provide home or community-based care to people with disabilities, effectively gutting the integration mandate that has kept about 8.5 million Americans out of institutions since the Supreme Court's 1999 Olmstead decision. The memo's own author acknowledges its novelty, quote, "We recognize that this view of Olmsted's import is out of step with the common understanding of that decision within the federal courts, yet it is now the official position of the U.S. government." The memo arrives as Texas and several other states are challenging the integration mandate in court, and the federal government is now aligned with the plaintiffs. It also arrives alongside deep Medicaid cuts from the One Big Beautiful Bill Act that defund the community-based services the memo says states no longer have to provide, essentially cutting the funding and removing the legal obligations simultaneously. Disability advocates call it a return to a, quote, dark and shameful era of institutionalization, noting that research shows institutional care is actually more expensive for states than community-based services, not less. And here in Indiana, the state's Family and Social Services Administration announced Wednesday they are joining a 90-day federal pilot program using Oracle AI software to detect Medicaid fraud in alleged improper payments from attendant care providers, while still declining to intervene in the single largest alleged Medicaid fraud case in state history. A federal whistleblower lawsuit alleges Indiana's Medicaid program was defrauded out of up to $724 million by hospitals and insurance companies. This was already dismissed once because plaintiffs couldn't prove the state even cared. Michael, I can't help but feel these two stories are related.
Yeah, it's hard to go through the same thing every story and how they're eroding our rights and don't seem to care about people, and yet they stand on their Christian soapbox to talk about how they care about people. And we just see this over and over in Indiana. And, again, that's one of the reasons why I chose to run, is because what they're doing and what they're saying don't match up. And I, at the very least, want to do that. I don't know how people keep all their stories straight. All these flag people that deal in this industry, their lies are incredible, and it's getting old.
So, Sierra, here they are. We talked about earlier, the federal government weaponized against vulnerable asylum seekers and immigrants, and here they are now being weaponized against the disabled. To Michael's point, not very Christian. I don't think Jesus would approve of this. But then if you look at our state government, again, a bunch of Christian nationalists, they like to proclaim how much they follow the Bible. But here they are cracking down on individuals using AI software to detect Medicaid fraud, which, things like community-based and home-based care for disabled folks. Yet they're letting slide this $724 million fraud case perpetuated by hospitals and insurance companies. Gee, I wonder if it's because hospitals and insurance companies are some of their largest campaign donors.
It absolutely is. It's always the donors. They're the ones that most politicians seem to care about. The cruelty really is the point. If these people cared about waste, fraud, and abuse the way that they cry to us that they care about waste, fraud, and abuse, first we would be listening to these families. If they are telling us that institutionalizing their family members and our neighbors is not cost effective, and it's not humane and doesn't actually help the people it's targeted to help, then we should not be using that model. We should be using whatever these families say provides the best service and has the most economic benefit to the taxpayer and to the families, because I want my tax dollars to helping people in this way. I don't want my tax dollars going towards blowing up a girls' school in Manaab. I know I don't get a say in that, but I think most rational Americans would feel that way. And these people they don't care about fraud, waste, and abuse. Fraud isn't the point, because as you said, the majority of Medicaid fraud is actually done on the provider side, not the patient side. So if you really wanted to target it, you would be targeting providers, hospitals, and insurance companies and doctors. You would not be targeting patients and people. I also don't really love hearing that a governmental agency with personal private patient information would be feeding that data into an Oracle AI model. I wonder if Medicaid recipients are aware of the data sharing, or if they have been given consent forms to, give informed consent over the being okay to share data in this way. But I know that Indiana Republicans specifically just are very rarely concerned with average Hoosiers and our needs. So
the mandate comes from the top, right? They emulate their orange daddy, and if there's someone on this planet who doesn't give two shits about consent, it's Donald Trump. But to tie this back in with the authoritarians throughout history that he's emulating, what's also happening here is eugenics. We're talking about making life difficult, institutionalizing, maybe withholding medical care from, God knows what else, with people with disabilities. I seem to remember something like this happening in somewhere in Central Europe in the 1930s, Michael.
I hope we can get a stop to it. It's terrible. At some time it felt like we were making progress in helping the people that need it most, and now we were kind of running to taking as much away as we can, and again putting the troubles of the United States and all the cost overrides on individuals. It's your fault. We're paying too much for your health care, and that's why we're losing a war that we should have never been in. And that's critical. Our government should not be doing. They should not be stress testing systems on human beings. It's a difference when you use that model to test computer software, but when you're harming lives, that's just not the place to be doing stress tests.
And nationalist movements throughout history have resorted to eugenics to justify various things, ethnic cleansing, the concentration of people in certain areas, all kinds of horrific crimes against humanity that eugenics helps to justify. Nationalism is on the rise globally. It's not just Christian nationalism here in America, though you are right to point out that that's our flavor here, and that it does model, what you saw in Germany in the 30s and 40s. But we can see in other countries, nationalism is on the rise, and it is becoming an issue when it seems that everybody just wants to carve out their little own ethno-national state, and everybody just wants the Haitians get Haiti. And Stephen Miller literally out here saying Haiti is for Haitians. They need to go back. It's problematic. So you are seeing eugenics on the rise globally because we are seeing nationalism on the rise globally, and people just in a race to carve out their little nationalist ethno-states.
And now powered, supercharged with the power of AI. Let us stay on the intersection of AI and corruption. So on Thursday, a new national nonprofit called Raise US, or maybe it's Raise Us, I don't know. Anyway, this nonprofit was launched. The group is co-chaired by former Biden Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo and former Indiana Governor Eric Holcomb, aiming to retrain workers for an AI economy. With backing from Anthropic, Microsoft, OpenAI, IBM, Cisco, and Indianapolis-based Eli Lilly, they've already raised $500 million toward their $1 billion goal. This is the former governor's most prominent public role since leaving office. A reminder, in 2019, Holcomb signed a bill offering up a 50-year sales tax exemption on equipment, construction, and electricity for AI data centers, the longest such exemption period of any state in the country. I don't know, Sierra, sounds like some soft self-dealing to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And color me shocked that a Biden-era administrator and Holcomb are working together in this effort to retrain workforce development. They're going to retrain the workforce to to work with AI now, the way that they wanted to retrain miners and coal miners and things to just be data coders and computer coders, right? That worked out really well. How's that job going now? So now we're just going to come in, and those same people that we trained to do coding and data analysis, now we're just going to retrain them to do something that with AI. I mean, I feel like if this technology was as revolutionary as they are trying to make it sound, they wouldn't have to fucking sell it. So sorry, they wouldn't have to freaking sell it so hard to us, because I don't know about you guys, but I am constantly coming up against, like, do you want to implement the AI feature? And I'm constantly having to figure out, how do I disable this? I don't need it. It's actually getting in my way. It's not turning me the best results. And frequently the Google AI overview is incorrect. It gives you a synopsis, and then you go click those links to find the actual source it came from, and you read it and go, so that's not what that says. So, like, I feel like if this technology was so revolutionary the way that they make it out to be, that they wouldn't need to sell it so hard. So it absolutely, to me, feels like self-dealing. It's a grift.
And listen, you know, it's not necessarily all or one or the other, right? I mean, like,
no,
AI is it's either, you know, the super revolutionary thing that's going to, like, put us all out of work. Okay, in which case, hey, we should really start talking about UBI or something to that
a
effect.
new social
like how
contract,
we're gonna, how we're gonna, you know, pay people to live. Maybe a care economy, like taking care of each other, is something that, you know, AI cannot do. Or it's a bubble and it's going to burst, and inevitably it's going to be too big to fail, and taxpayers are going to have to pay for it. But, you know, Michael, like, I'm not reflexively anti-AI. There are places that it is useful, I suppose, but you know, it just seems, to Sierra's point, that it is largely continuation. If we throw things way back in the machine to the beginning of the show, a perpetuation of the neoliberal economics and funneling all of the wealth up to a very, very small number of people.
Yeah, they're trying to jump on the financial bandwagon, really, is what it seems to me. And that's why these tax abatements in Indiana, why it's being pushed so hard and fast. None of this construction is new by any means, but the time scales are. And they're trying to find all these loopholes to get around. And what looks like damaging communities, they can be built and not damage communities. But then they can't be built at this speed. And so they want to just get in before people get educated. Yeah, in the long term, I think there's many things that it could help with on the data processing side. But it doesn't, the bubble is 100% financial at this point. No, not
move
human.
fast and break things, right? The things
and in
are
the process,
people's
they're going to break up, our
breaking
lives,
people,
our
breaking
soil,
communities,
our air, our water. And it turns out they don't even need the water in order to cool these systems. There are a myriad of other solutions. Water is just the cheapest. So that's why we're even having this debate over the water sources. But yes, move fast and break things is the mantra.
Just as we see, you know, the Biden administration appointee Raimondo working with Republican Holcomb, corruption is a bipartisan affair, right? And to that effect, let's turn to Democratic Indianapolis Mayor Joe Hogsett. This week, part 3 of a joint investigation between the Indianapolis Star and Mirror Indy entitled Mr. Clean was released. Previous installments detailed how Hogsett ignored senior advisor Thomas Cook's secret relationship as public dollars flowed to developers he represented. Cook negotiated more than $80 million in city incentives for his clients while in an adulterous relationship with the head of the department that oversaw those incentives. That was part 1. In part 2, reporters found that the mayor's allies benefited from no-bid city contracts. Well, the newest piece found that Hogsett's top campaign fundraiser, Emily Gerwitz, arranged for donor wish lists of preferred city contracts to be physically delivered to then Public Works Director Dan Parker. 3 of the wished-for contracts were subsequently awarded, worth up to $1 million combined, to companies whose executives have donated nearly $200,000 to Hogsett over a decade. That is what you call return on investment. The same fundraiser recommended donors for mayoral board appointments, and in at least one case, within days of a donation. Additionally, Parker sent emails from his personal account to city employees' personal accounts asking them to phone bank for Hogsett's 2023 re-election campaign, conduct that likely violated both the Hatch Act and Indiana's ghost employment statute. Sierra, it's a big club and we ain't in it.
Yeah, and it is upsetting when this is what Democrats in Indianapolis are doing, because it depresses turnout when we're coming up on an election and we have Democrats across the state saying, look, Republicans have fumbled the ball for 20 years. We need Democrats to rule. And you have a lot of the base being able to turn and say, but look at Indianapolis. Is it necessarily just that Republicans in Indiana are corrupt, or is it maybe possibly that Democrats are also susceptible to corruption and we should focus on electing good quality people and not just necessarily electing anyone with a D next to their name? So I think that it would not just benefit Hoosiers in Indianapolis, of which I'm one of them. I think it would also benefit Democrats across the state if we could have competent and not corrupt leadership in Indianapolis, because when we have what's essentially looked at as like a Democratic sandbox being, full of cat turds, it's problematic for the rest of the state.
We say this all the time around here, Michael. When people think Indiana Democrat, the most prominent example right there is Joe Hogsett. And listen, I hate to keep relitigating this thing, but Hogsett is just a branch on the Bai tree, which has run the Indiana Democratic Party for 40 years now. And we're supposed to change things and eliminate the corruption from state government that, again, very much has been perpetuated by the Republican supermajority for the last 25 years. But, these are the people we're expecting to do that? I'm not seeing it.
No, I think the three of us have been pounding the table that we don't see it. And there's a reason we wanted other candidates in the early part of this year's political race in Indiana. And so, we want it. We try to point that out, and obviously we get our hands slapped for it and things like that. And but we're going to still fight for the party platform with no loopholes, and that's what we want to do. Unfortunately, we're in a two-party system, so there's not really any leaving. So we can just kind of push to the left a little bit and keep working towards getting the right people elected.
Let's talk about, we're going to stay on Hogsett in a way here. So the same corrupt Hogsett administration that has been profiled in these Mr. Clean articles is also responsible for facilitating the privatization of Indianapolis public schools. Last year, the mayor oversaw the creation of the Indianapolis Public Education Corporation, a first-of-its-kind municipal governing board mandated by the state legislature. It unifies core operations for both Indianapolis public schools and local public charter schools within IPS. This week, IPEC voted unanimously to put a 37.2 cent per $100 assessed value property tax rate on the November ballot, which would generate about $87.8 million annually, split evenly between IPS and roughly 60 charter schools inside the district boundary. Now, even if voters approve it, IPS still faces $20 million in additional cuts on top of $24 million already announced. Plus, it needs $10 million in efficiencies, $12 million reimbursed by innovation schools, and state help on a $40 million special education gap that IPS argues the state should be covering. On the other end of the income spectrum, Carmel Clay Schools is putting a $62 million 8-year operating referendum on the November ballot after Indiana's property tax law changes are projected to cut district revenue there by roughly $120 million over the same period, essentially erasing the value of a referendum Carmel Clay voters already approved in 2023. Michael, we're seeing this all over the state. I want to say the Indiana Coalition for Public Education is saying something like 100 different school districts this year are expected to seek local tax increases to pay for the cuts that the state government and their property tax, quote unquote, reform have caused.
Yeah, we've been preaching about SCA 1 now for a couple of years and saying that it's put this undue pressure locally. What's interesting is they put most of the pressure on their fellow party mates down ballot. And we've seen people talking down ballot like, hey, where did all this come from? Like, it's your party. It's your party. They've been doing it to you. I don't know what else to tell you, folks. School districts are losing money left and right, and it's an expensive endeavor for sure. What I love is a ballot referendum. How about that? Why can't we do that for more things and let people vote on it? I hate what is going on with the taxes, but this shows like, oh, look, you can put the power in people's hands, and it'll probably go 50-50, 60-40 when it comes up in November for schools around the state, and that'll help some schools, and some other schools will continue to struggle, and we're going to have to, again, if we want change, we got to get new people in the legislature to write new financial law to get schools funded back the way they need to be across the state, because we can't get into these little tribes and I'm going to protect my school, and then our neighbor school struggles. That means our whole community or our whole county struggles. So again, we have to take care of those that have the least so that we can all have the most.
And Sierra, I want to compare and contrast these two referendums. You have IPS, which, is largely serving a lot of low-income students. And then you have Carmel Clay, which is perhaps the most affluent community in the entire state, also seeking one of these referendums. IPS serves roughly 3 times as many students as Carmel Clay, but it's seeking 11 times the annual referendum funding, which, it's putting a burden on folks in the city that can afford it a lot less than the people in Carmel, and it's precisely because of the way we fund these things based on local property tax revenue, which is in a way it's like inherently discriminatory the way we fund our schools in this state and throughout much of the country. It's not just an Indiana problem.
No, but absolutely tying education and the funding of education to property taxes is problematic, because inherently then, yes, places like Carmel will have some of the best education where places like Martinsville will not. And that's, we shouldn't have a system where your parents' zip code dictates what kind of education that you get to receive, because as studies have shown, what education you get kind of shows and translates to what economic opportunities that you will have in your adult life. So punishing students because their zip code is 46234 instead of whatever Carmel's is just not, it's not fair, but it's also, again, it works against the best interests of the state as a whole when you have economic and educational disparities the way that we do here in Indiana. And our public education system has been hollowed out and privatized through vouchers programs and most of my adult life. So we have to stop trying to fund it through privatization. We have to stop trying to reinvent the wheel on education and understand that education is not something that makes profit. It is inherently something that we are just going to keep spending money on because we are investing. It's an investment into the children of the future of our state. And we are continuously, again, cutting off our nose to spite our face when we disinvest from our children and the future of this state, the future workforce. We have a brain drain on this state. We have a less educated workforce, and it's not helping or benefiting us in any way to continue to take money from these communities and to just continue to divest from our public education.
Yeah, 100%. And, like libertarians and Republicans like to treat education like it's a product, like it's a business and not a public service and investment in our future. So let's talk about Republicans and investment in the future here a little bit. So, last week they held their convention in Fort Wayne, and all of these public education cuts are, of course, a result of Governor Mike Braun's so-called property tax reform bill of 2025. Well, at the convention last weekend, Hoosier Republicans adopted a platform that would seek to go even further, eliminating property taxes entirely. The plan would replace the tax with a 7% levy on services like haircuts and landscaping and oil changes and things like that, making Indiana the only state without property taxes if passed. But schools and local governments rely heavily on property tax revenue, and the proposal would eliminate tools like school referendums and TIF districts, compounding the funding crisis already squeezing districts statewide. Also adopted at their convention was a plan to close the state's primaries to voters explicitly registered as members of their chosen party. This push comes in response to Democrats crossing over to support Senator Spencer Deary against Trump-endorsed Paula Copenhaver in State Senate District 23, a race ultimately decided by a mere 3 votes. It is now a centerpiece of Secretary of State nominee Max Engling's platform. Sierra, I guess I want to start there with the closed primary things. Right now Indiana has like semi-open primaries. You can go in and say, I want a Democrat ballot or a Republican ballot, and you can cross over and vote. That can potentially have effects down the road if you ever want to run in one of the other parties. If you strategically pulled a ballot for the other one at one point, that can really screw you. I don't know. I think instead of closing primaries, we should open them wide open like California does. One primary for everybody. Top 2, top 4. I don't know. We could sort that out how you want to do it. Advance to the general. I think that would have a moderating influence and get elected officials that are more suitable to the wide swath of Hoosier voters.
I absolutely think that we should have a more open primary. I am in favor of more people participating in primaries because that is the place to make your voice heard. If you want a party to move closer to the center, further to the left, further to the right, whatever you're looking for, that is the place to make your voice heard. And I watched a couple of interviews with Max Engling, and I understand what they're saying. That doesn't work. There are plenty of independent Hoosiers who do not pull one or the other. There's also plenty of Hoosiers who live in areas where pulling a Democratic ballot is not a thing. There just isn't one to pull. So do you mean to tell me that because I'm a Democrat and I live in a certain area, I'm just not allowed to participate in any primary or have any say in what, person gets put forth because I'm just a Democrat? Like, that's just not going to work. It's also anti-democratic. Like, we are continuously seeing elected officials putting forth legislation and policies and getting behind worldviews that are inherently anti-democratic. And this is just another one of those. So I am all for having more people participating in a primary. If Republicans want to participate in Democratic primaries, sure, have at it, Hoss, because I would absolutely like to be able to participate in Republican primaries and pull them closer, to a logical place instead of far off the ledge, like they are kind of with Max Engling. So,
Yeah, and Michael, I guess on the other portion of that, I want to talk about, and I'm going to talk about this later this summer with John E. Bartlett. I want to say that it is his opponent, J.D. Prescott, who came up with this brilliant eliminate property taxes plan and the service tax. But quickly, this is a terrible idea, isn't it? This is inherently a regressive tax. It punishes those. It taxes working class folks as opposed to large property holders.
Right. Yeah, and there is a certain amount of responsibility when you own a property, and people say, "Well, I've paid for it all." Well, how do you get to that property? How do you get water to that property? How do you get police to that property? There's all this infrastructure that goes around. Otherwise, you'd be on a dirt road, in an outhouse on that big property. And most of the ones around me in Johnson County are not in dirt roads and outhouses. Quite the contrary. So I think placing some amount of tax on, as a rent of infrastructure, so to speak, as a property tax. Now, maybe we pool a different way, and so that you get more broad funding, and it's not right from the rich, affluent county to that county's school. But there's maybe some distribution. We could look at it in that sense.
Yeah. Sierra, what do you think about the property tax portion of their platform?
Well, taxing the rest of us working class plebes so that the rich can have their cake and eat it too is absolutely the point. That is the point of this, so that we can have higher wheel tax, gas tax, all the like. Um, it is just austerity politics so that people who have properties with large property taxes don't have to pay them. But to Michael's point, you live in a community. You use the roads and bridges. You need water and infrastructure. You would hate to have that $1 million mansion in Munster catch fire and find that you didn't pay this week's or this month's fire department bill because that's not a part of property taxes anymore, and your shit just burns to the ground instead. I mean, we do have these things for a reason, and I think people need to be reminded that yes, you did buy the property and yes, you own it. And I can really appreciate that libertarian, it's my damn property and I own it. But yeah, do you want roads to be, potholes to be filled on the way home? Do you want water to continue to come to your house? Do you want gas and electricity at your house? Do you want these things that it takes to live in a society? If you want to be someone who lives completely off the grid and you have your own self-sustaining little ecosystem, like I think Thomas Massey has down in Kentucky, have at it, Hoss. But I just think that we cannot just say that property taxes have to go away so that working class people can pay more in taxes so that we can offset the rich not wanting to pay their fair share in taxes. And now that I'm saying this, doesn't Florida do this? Doesn't Florida do this?
No, I looked into it. I was like, Indiana's going to be the first place to completely eliminate property taxes. There's other places that have reduced them greatly.
Okay, that's it. Yeah.
We would be the first to eliminate them
and
completely.
It sucks being a visitor in Florida because we pay for that too. When you go to visit Florida, you're helping pay for the offset of those taxes because sales taxes are increased in Florida.
Exactly.
So we're just robbing Peter to pay Paul. It's just unfortunate that Peter's really broke and Paul's really rich.
I've got family out in the Pacific Northwest, and they seem to do it what I think is a little more fairly out there. They have higher property taxes. Oregon, for example, doesn't have a state sales tax. You go there, you get something on the menu, it is what it costs. So that's interesting. But, Michael, to to a point that we've brought up throughout the show, Sierra's brought up kind of the lessons we learned from the World War II era, and how we put things in place after the war to so we wouldn't make the same mistakes again. Seems like, I don't know, about every 80 years or so, we seem to forget the lessons we've learned, and the economic lessons, we're also forgetting those from the New Deal era, that we have to do things collectively together as a society, and we can't just, have a series of individuals. We're all in this together.
Yeah, I'm a big all in this together kind of person. It's been my thing, playing team sports and working in groups and whatnot, because we can do more together than we can individually. And we can do that in our neighborhoods, in our communities, in our state, if we can get some new people in control that, again, are really going to put the government back to work for the people and not for a few individuals or corporations.
And I think that'll work as long as we organize along class lines and not party lines. I think for too long we have been organizing along party lines, and we really need to start seeing a whole working class organized effort.
100%, exactly. So couple things left I want to talk about here this week. We talked about Governor Braun's tax reform and the way it's starving public schools. Well, he also fancies himself the new sheriff in town. Talked about a big game about keeping skyrocketing utility prices in check. Well, last week, we covered Braun's phony exasperation as his hand-picked Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission approved a substantial rate hike for AES, the primary utility provider in central Indiana. Well, Monday, Braun removed Andy Zay as URC chairman, just days after Zay was among 3 commissioners who approved the $71 million increase Braun publicly condemned, replacing him with Commissioner Anthony Swinger, who hadn't voted on the AES case due to a prior conflict. Now, as you know, and not to apologize for utilities, but it's gotten hard to keep these rates down when the Trump administration keeps renewing its emergency order keeping 2 aging Indiana coal plants, NIPSCO's Schaefer and CenterPoint's Coley, which They did again last week. The absurdity is hard to miss. CenterPoint's own regional president called Cawley, quote, inefficient and increasingly unreliable, and 2 of Schaefer's units are currently offline for major turbine and boiler repairs, yet the order mandating their operation stands. The Sierra Club estimates the cost to consumers at $174,000 a day for Schaefer and $21,000 a day for Cawley. Sierra, like... they're shooting themselves in the foot. You know, Republicans, they talk a big game about keeping utility prices down, but here is, Daddy Trump at the top saying, no, you have to keep these inefficient, expensive coal plants going. I don't know, because I hate the environment, because I'm stuck in the 1920s in terms of my economic beliefs. And who winds up paying for that? We all do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to say I am an AES ratepayer. They absolutely are raking us over the coals here in central Indiana. It's quite awful. Trump has a lot to do with it. The Indiana General Assembly, the Republican supermajority, also has a lot to do with it in the legislation that they pass, and the inability for our state to really diversify and try to invest in solar and wind. And I know they're doing a little nuclear, but we'll see. We'll watch that space, I suppose. But Braun removing Andy Zay for approving her rate increase is just hilarious to me, because remember who Andy Zay was in the legislature. He was someone who constantly voted against ratepayers. He didn't care about affordability in the legislature. He doesn't care about it now. He also was funded by Duke Energy, AES, NeSource, American Electric Power. So, like, it seemed obvious that he wasn't going to come in and be the arbiter for rational and affordable rates for Hoosiers. It was laughable to think that. But also, Braun is just playing kabuki theater. He is just so unpopular, and he knows that people are struggling under utility bills, skyrocketing utility bills. So he just wants to throw us a bone and say, look, I'm trying. I will replace Andy Zay only after 11 days. He did not outlive Liz Truss's cabbage head of lettuce. He absolutely barely had time to unpack his office before he was out. But the next guy who comes in will inevitably have to adjust the rates anyway and go up, because again, the laws that the legislature passed allows for them to keep coming back and recoup the costs even after infrastructure isn't done, even if they don't actually build the reactor or don't actually invest in infrastructure, because Ed Soliday was paid off by Duke Energy and allowed for that. He authored that bill and then got it passed. So it is just kabuki theater, and I think Hoosiers are tired of it, and AES ratepayers are absolutely tired of it.
Braun just, like, he thinks if I look like I'm doing something, then the people will think I'm working for them. But to your point, it's theater. Michael, he's rearranging the chairs on the Titanic. The chairs are all occupied by, one, people he appointed to the Regulatory Commission, and to Sierra's point, people who are all on the take from the major utility companies in the state.
Yeah, no surprise. I wouldn't even be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised for this to have been discussed in advance of, hey, we're going to, the first time they come around and ask, you're going to give them the increase. I'm going to fire you in uproar, and we're going to then pass it down to the next guy. And that's how each of his buddies get a little piece of that chairmanship premium pay, and they just keep passing it around. And that's one thing getting involved in politics is there are these people, you're conspiracy theorists, that these conversations happen behind closed doors, and it's
kayfabe.
sickening.
You've just described. It's professional wrestling.
Yeah.
So let's talk about our final story this week. And July 1st is Wednesday, and as such, we've got a bunch of new laws going into effect, including the following. So Indiana's public camping ban takes effect Wednesday, making it a Class C misdemeanor with up to 60 days in jail and a $500 fine to sleep or shelter on unauthorized public property. This is criminalizing homelessness, At the same time, Indiana's affordable housing shortage remains unaddressed. A Veterans Homeless Services CEO warned it could harm homeless veterans specifically. Also, Senate Enrolled Act 76, mandating local law enforcement honor ICE detainer requests, turning what was voluntary into a legal obligation, making our local law enforcement do the Fed's job for them. It prohibits employers from knowingly hiring unauthorized workers as well. Here in my county, our Sheriff Ruben Marte has a federal lawsuit challenging the law. Excuse me, it was denied a preliminary injunction earlier this month. Beginning on July 1st, also, schools must implement a full bell-to-bell personal device ban. Phones, tablets, smartwatches all must be left home or stored powered off all day, with narrow exceptions for medical needs. And the Indiana National Guard is now establishing a military police force with arrest, search, and seizure powers deployable statewide at the governor's discretion, also going into effect Wednesday. Lots of other laws going into effect Wednesday, and we also talked about the Trump's Medicaid cuts and the One Big Beautiful Bill Act and stuff. All those are going to start to come down the pipe here beginning next month as well. Michael, what stands out to you?
Oh boy. So I'm looking at these off to the side. I'm interested on this National Guard military police force. I think that's going to come into play sooner than later. Probably
like election day.
I think it might come in
that.
sooner than that as a trial to make sure they have a plan for election day. And so I'll be interested to see whether it be parades, if they see us, certain people gather in big numbers for a parade, or you could imagine like Pride, Indianapolis Pride. Had this been in effect fully, like, oh, that's a big group, we're just going to go help, kind of thing. Obviously, as an intimidation factor. So we'll see, and if we have any protests, big protests prior to the elections. I hope we do.
There's something's going to pop off between now and then. We can almost guarantee it. Yeah, for sure.
I also think that the National Guard becoming a military police force at the direction of the governor is interesting. I also agree with Michael that I think it will be used prior to the election, probably as a test run. I would say probably where it will be used, I think Pride is woke 1.0. I don't think that that's what's going to happen this time. I think that the political elite are seeing, the moneyed interests are seeing where the wind is blowing, and they're seeing that AI and data centers and the opposition to them is a bipartisan issue. It is something that cuts across the political divide. In fact, it is something that is really healing COVID divides. People that you used to not be able to talk to because you were mad about the way that they masked or did or didn't disinfect their groceries, you now have something else, a political lightning rod to talk about. And it really is not just like corruption and money in politics and the Epstein class. That is another one. The other one is data centers. People do not want this shit in their backyard. And I think that we are going to see that the people who are backed by AI and backed by data centers and the companies are going to ask the governor to institute a state of emergency because we have these Hoosiers who are rowdy and rascals, and they're just radical people who just don't want these data centers in their communities. And I think that that's what it will be weaponized for things that are more salient and cut across party lines.
We talked about NSPM 7 previously, with the Prairie Land sentencing in Texas, and one of the other things, in addition to the anti-capitalist and the anti-fascist and the anti-traditional values points in that memo, there was a separate memo issued that listed like anti-tech extremism as a potential vector for domestic terrorism.
Yes, if you signed up to have ever gone and attended a protest for data centers, you are now on a list. And Ken Klippenstein does really great reporting and follows closely with what NSPM 7 and with what DHS, the lists that DHS is creating against Americans. But yes, I think that when if push comes to shove, and the way that they are pushing Indiana becoming a tech crossroads of America, they want to make us the data center crossroads of America. I think that they will absolutely look to the National Guard to quash dissent amongst Hoosiers who are trying to oppose that in their communities.
And then at the same time, we just saw this housing bill still up in the air. Maybe it doesn't get passed. Hoosiers' utility bills are going through the roof. So that's another thing putting pressure on family budgets. You're going to find more people, put out of a home, out on the streets. And Michael, beginning Wednesday, it is illegal to be homeless, essentially.
Yeah, talk about small government and not being in your home. Now they're in your tent. They're so in your business. Obviously, they're in your healthcare. They're in, they're making rules down to the minutia of if you carry a phone or not in school. Not my thing. I think that's for the schools to decide. I think that's for the towns to manage. Making homeless lists illegal or public camping illegal is a terrible thing. And, there's a root to that we really need to be attacking, and we're not.
Sierra, final word. Any last things that jump out to you about the laws going into effect Wednesday that you want to talk about there?
My last point is just that when capitalism fails and when we have times of uncertainty, we have fascists who will absolutely start attacking the left, because the left is historically so good at doing systemic analysis and saying, right, you want to end homelessness. Okay, well, what is the system behind homelessness? What drives that? It is the fact that we have an unaffordable housing crisis, the fact that we allow private equity and out-of-state investors to come in and buy up Indiana homes and turn them for rent back to Hoosiers at rates that we cannot afford, pricing people out of the communities that they grew up in. And so when the left does that, that's not beneficial to the capitalists. It's not beneficial to the fascists. So inevitably, they start resorting to violence and turning on the left and saying, no, it's actually the immigrants. We're going to punch down because the left wants you to punch up, and they never want us to gain class consciousness. So that is why it is so important that we understand the moment that we're in and start organizing as a working class people, because the capital class already is organized. They are 1%. It's very easy to get organized. The 99% of us need to start waking up to the fact that they are crushing us and making it so that we can't afford houses, and we can't tent in our cars or in tents. We can't camp in tents. This is inevitably just going to fuel the prison industrial complex, putting people in jails so that we can have free labor. So that's just, and it costs the taxpayers more to provide 3 hots and a cot when we could actually just work to fix the systemic issue, which is the affordability crisis in our housing.
100% zesty final words from the Hoosier Lemon. Couldn't help but get in one last one there. Sierra, where can the folks find you online?
You can find me on TikTok and at Substack at Hoosier Lemon. I'm on Instagram a little bit. I try to be there more, but yeah, just drop a comment or message me. I'm pretty open to talk to.
Yeah, be sure you follow or subscribe to Sierra on Substack there. And you working on anything for this week?
I am still working on a piece about Muscatatuck and the Christian nationalists that are allowed to train at our military bases here in Indiana and taxpayer dollars. So, yeah, look out for that. I know, right? Happy note to end on.
I mean, glad you're writing about it, but you hate to see it. Michael, how about you? Where can folks find you? Where can they maybe get some more information about your campaign?
Yeah, again, I'm running for Indiana House District 47, which is in Johnson and Shelby counties. And you can find me on social media at Friends of Michael Potter. My website's friendsofmichaelpotter.com, and my email is friendsofmichaelpotter@gmail.com. So, Friends of Michael Potter.
All right, very good. And lots of stuff coming up here on Progressive Indiana Network this week. On Tuesday, I am back with the Who's Left podcast. My guests, I got 3 guests this week. We got a packed show. I've got Joshua Brandt, Ben Davis, and Harrison Jacobo, all running as independent candidates in this year's election for Independence Day. Hey, we got a theme. Every Thursday morning, we've got the Concerned Clergy podcast drop on Progressive Indiana Network. Derek Holder with Hold 'em Accountable on Fridays. So you can, if you would, please support our work with a paid subscription at progressiveindiana.net and follow us on most social media sites at the full spelled out name, Progressive Indiana Network. On Blue Sky and TikTok, we are at PIN Indiana. Please help us grow with a follow wherever you are at. You can find me on Blue Sky, Instagram, and Threads at whosleft.us, and on Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube at Who's Left. Send me a DM there or email me at scott@whosleft with feedback, tips, ideas, concerns, whatever you got. So like, share, subscribe to us. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe to Sierra on Substack. Donate and volunteer for Michael. I think that covers everything. Let's build a radically democratic Indiana together. Until next time, I'm Scott Aaron Rogers signing off from Bloomington. Love each other, Indiana.